And we bring in Albert Breer, Monday Morning Quarterback senior NFL reporter, the lead content strategist there. Did Deshaun Watson demand a trade or request a trade, Albert? And is there a difference?
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a difference. He wants out. He's not returning their phone calls right now. And, I think the new GM, Nick Caserio, the new head coach, David Culley, are in a tough spot here because I think both those guys would, for obvious reasons, like to try and mend fences. But for right now, and I don't think Deshaun Watson really wants to talk to anybody over there. And maybe that'll change over time, but that's where he's at. I think one of the things that makes this really tough for Caserio and Culley is that his issue, Deshaun Watson's issue, is with the one thing that they can't change, and that's ownership. And so I don't know how they go about fixing this. I know that there haven't been, teams have called, but I know the Texans haven't been engaging people in trade talks to this point. We'll see if that changes over time. It's certainly interesting because, I think you have all the quarterback movement we all sort of anticipate coming over the next couple of months. And there are, different sets of negotiations that are going to be moving at very different paces.
I was also wondering the timing of all of this yesterday, that you announced that you're bringing in Culley. You got your new head coach. He's a minority. And then Schefter tweets out, whoever told him the information, that now it's official that Deshaun Watson wants out. On the day you're bringing in your coach, this news comes out. Is that just a coincidence?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to speculate on what Adam did specifically, but, a lot of times in cases like this, when there is a story that's sort of lingering out there, the way the Watson thing's been lingering out there, and there's some movement related to the story, like a head coach hire would be movement related to the story. You might check back in with people and ask around again. And sometimes that's how these things come to light. So I think it was maybe a little bit more of that than, anybody, connected to Deshaun Watson trying to plant those things, because they've been saying, the people around Watson have been saying for a couple of weeks now, this is going to be a really difficult one for the Texans to fix. And even if they bring back Tim Kelly, the offensive coordinator, that Deshaun has grown to like a lot, even if they bring in a quarterback's coach he's okay with, even if they bring in a head coach he's okay with, his issues are larger than just that with the Texans. He feels like he was lied to, and he feels like he was misled and to some degree patronized over the last couple of months. And so, I think that the idea that this was just planted on the day that the Texans announced the head coach hire, I think that that's probably at least a little bit incorrect. And I can tell you this, the trade request didn't go in yesterday. So it's not like, David Culley's named the head coach and then they turn around and ask for the trade. That's actually been in for, I think, a little over a week now.
Give me the teams that should be in play for Deshaun Watson, who can be in play for Deshaun Watson. Not one of ththose, hypothetically, because it turns out that feels like there's 20 teams that should be involved with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I think the two that I think he would most like to go to, when I've asked around about this, that have come up the most are Miami and San Francisco, for different reasons. Miami is an ascending program. They're going to have the ability from a resources standpoint to put a lot around the quarterback over the next couple of years. And so I think Miami would appeal to Deshaun for, a number of different reasons. And then I think San Francisco is ready-made, right? If they trade you to the Niners, this is a team that was in the Super Bowl a year ago, and the Niners have the 12th pick. So it's not like you're talking about a team with, the 28th, the 30th, the 32nd pick. Both these teams are contenders, but contenders that have high picks to deal. So Miami and San Francisco are two teams that I think logically would make sense. People have mentioned the Jets. I do think that, just from a business standpoint, there's, some appeal there. I think from a football standpoint, it might be a little bit more difficult because they're a little further away than the Dolphins or Niners are. So those would be the three teams that I would start with. The truth is, Dan, I would think, half the league would be interested in Deshaun Watson. And I think what you've seen over the last, couple of weeks with this idea that there's going to be a lot of quarterback movement, there's a Mahomes effect going on in the NFL right now where teams are looking at it and say, okay, what's it going to take at that position for me to win over the next 5 to 10 years? And it used to be that you could win with maybe the 10th best quarterback, the 12th best quarterback in the league. The Ravens won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. The Seahawks won with Russell Wilson before he really became Russell Wilson. I think teams are looking at it now and saying, I don't know if that's possible anymore. And that's why you have teams like the Rams and the Niners and the Raiders who've invested in young quarterbacks that are looking at these sorts of things. So if Watson were to become available, and I think that, all the teams we've mentioned would be interested, but then there would be teams that have sitting quarterbacks that would look at it too.
What if Houston said to Jacksonville, we'll give you Deshaun Watson straight up for the number 1 overall pick, hypothetically?
I love the idea because Urban Meyer has really strong background with Deshaun Watson. He recruited him hard to Ohio State. And I think if you asked Deshaun Watson about it, if he hadn't gone to Clemson, he would have gone to Ohio State. So I think, for Urban Meyer, there might be a little bit of an element of Deshaun Watson being the one who got away. There are reasons why it wouldn't happen, though, too. I mean, for one thing, Trevor Lawrence is, a generational prospect. So, you're talking about a generational prospect and a well-established top 5 quarterback. So what are your tiebreakers when you're looking between the two? One guy's 25, the other guy's 21. Well, Trevor Lawrence would be on a rookie contract. And also, if you're Jacksonville, you're sort of helping a rival in a very you're very much helping a rival get out of a bad situation. So would the Texans look at that? I think they absolutely would if they were pushed to the point where they felt like they had to trade Deshaun Watson. Would the Jaguars look at it? I think that's a little bit iffier just because of those two things, the rookie contract dynamic and also the fact that you'd really be helping out a division rival and giving them a great answer in what seems like an impossible situation.
There's a chance that Trevor Lawrence doesn't turn out to be this generational talent. Yeah. There's always this chance that it feels like we've rubber stamped that he's going to be John Elway. Mm-hmm. There's no guarantees. He could turn out to be just a good quarterback, not generational here.
Well, let me give you some history though. Okay. Talking to people who've been doing this for a long time, who are paid to evaluate this. 4 quarterbacks really, are in that category. Right. And this is over my lifetime. And I was too young to remember Elway, but it's John Elway, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, and Trevor Lawrence. Look at the second quarterbacks taken in those drafts, okay? Those are the 4 that really stick out. Sure thing, 100% going to be a top 5 quarterback coming out of college. The second quarterback taken in 83 was Todd Blackledge. The second quarterback taken in 98 was Ryan Leaf. And the second quarterback taken in 2012 was Robert Griffin. So I think that sort of illustrates when a guy is seen this way, generally, it's a pretty good bet you're going to get there. And if you look at who was the second quarterback taken in their classes, it sort of illustrates the difference between one and another,
He's Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback senior NFL reporter, lead content strategist there. I don't know what Ben Roethlisberger's doing and the Steelers, that if Ben says it doesn't matter the money, is that enough for the Steelers to take Ben back? Or how much is this based off Ben's age, his health, and his performance last year down the stretch?
I think there are a lot of factors, not the least of which that I think Ben, if he's self-aware about this and he's smart about this, he recognizes there could be options for the Steelers out there where maybe we don't have to go forward with Ben Roethlisberger this year. Normally a quarterback holds all the cards. It's okay, well, if it's not me, then who's it going to be? This year, with some of the quarterbacks that might get moved, Matthew Stafford could get moved, and I believe Matthew Stafford could get moved before the Super Bowl.
Before the Super Bowl?
Yeah, you see some of the options out there.
Okay, wait a minute. You got a team in mind here, Albert.
I don't have a single team in mind, but I just can tell you this, Dan. The trade market for Matthew Stafford over the last week, and this is in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, I think talks have really escalated on Matthew Stafford. And I think it'd be smart of the Lions to do this now, right? Because before we know whether or not Deshaun Watson is going to be available, before we know whether or not Sam Darnold's going to be available, before we know whether or not the Rams are going to move off of Jared Goff, the Niners are going to move off of Jimmy Garoppolo, the Raiders are going to move off of Derek Carr. Before we have any certainty on any of that, the Lions can get in front of it and say, here's a quarterback that you can have right now, and you don't need to worry about where the rest of the market goes. And so, if you're talking about supply and demand, this could be an offseason where supply outweighs demand at quarterback. And so the Lions, I think, are trying to get out in front of that. They talked to different teams this week. And there are some teams, look, there are a few teams where we know they're going to be aggressive at quarterback this offseason, right? New England, Indianapolis, Carolina, Washington, all of those teams. I think though, I can't tell you which one he's going to go to, but I think the Lions are of a mind to try and get this done over the next week or so, if they can, the same way the Chiefs got Alex Smith done really early in the offseason when they were offloading him to make way for Patrick Mahomes, because they feel like if we do it now, we'll get ahead of the supply demand curve and we'll be able to maybe get a first round pick plus something else.
What are the Rams doing?
I think here's the analogy on the Rams. The analogy on the Rams is where the Raiders have been and where the Niners have been, which is we're not totally unhappy with our quarterback, but our eyes are open for an upgrade. And, I've used this analogy and I hope people get this because this is like a spot I was in from a life standpoint, right? At one point, it's like being in like a month-to-month lease, right? So if you're in a month-to-month lease and you're looking to buy, it's a great spot to be in, right? Because you don't have pressure to get out of your lease. Like my lease ends date X, so now I got to find my next place after that. It's like I can kind of survey the market and whether I want to do it this year or next year, we'll see, but I can kind of pick my spot. And that's sort of the approach I think the Raiders have taken with Derek Carr since Gruden got there. And I think the Niners are sort of getting there with Jimmy Garoppolo. And that's where I think the Rams are, So I think if there's an upgrade available, like they are going to look very hard at it. And again, I think part of this is that Mahomes effect that we're talking about, which is, can you win with the 10th or 12th or 14th quarterback in the league anymore? I think some teams, again, are looking at it and saying, I don't know if we'll ever be able to get by Kansas City if we don't have a top 5, top 7 quarterback. And, if you're Buffalo, you feel pretty good that Josh Allen might be able to get there. If you're the Chargers, you feel pretty good that Justin Herbert might be able to get there. This is why the Texans, if I'm the Texans, I'm doing everything I can to keep Deshaun Watson because it looks like you are there. Like he may not be better. He may not be as good as Mahomes, but you can at least compete with Mahomes with that guy. And I think you got these teams that are sort of on that next tier down where it's like, are we ever going to be good enough with Jared Goff? Are we ever going to be good enough with Derek Carr? Are we ever going to be good enough with Jimmy Garoppolo? These are the questions that I think are being asked. And so I think the Rams are in that category with a team like the Niners, with a team like the Raiders.
Why is it that every quarterback who could be available is a great fit for the Patriots?
Well, I don't know. Would the quarterbacks agree with that though?
No, I don't know, but it feels.
Who's this guy going to be throwing? Who's this guy going to be throwing to?
But it feels like every article, everybody is a great fit for the Patriots, no matter who it is.
Yeah,
Deshaun Watson, great fit. Matthew Stafford, great fit. It feels like everybody is a great fit, but not everybody is a great fit for the Patriots.
Yeah, do you want to go there is the question.
Yes.
Now, I do think there's some flexibility in what they do scheme-wise. Josh has shown he can coach different types of quarterbacks. Didn't work with Cam this year, but they had some success with, Matt Castle way back, in 2008 and in 2016 during Brady's suspension. They got Jacoby Brissett going and Jimmy Garoppolo going. And so, I think there is, a perception that the coaching is so good there that they'll make it work with whoever. And as long as it's a good guy they're bringing in, and, by all accounts, Matthew Stafford, really good guy, Deshaun Watson, really good guy, then people are going to see that player as a fit. I don't know how attractive that situation is to a quarterback right now. I mean, we saw what happened with Cam, and part of that was Cam himself, but Dan, who are you throwing to? I think the Patriots can be very aggressive about going and fixing the problem. But the question is how far they can go in one offseason. How much better can they make what was a completely broken situation in 2020?
I didn't think there was a there with Aaron Rodgers. And then I've had, people in your business as NFL insiders who say that it's the worst kept secret, that Rodgers and LaFleur don't get along. And, Aaron, I was told Aaron loves to push buttons. He's passive aggressive. But, the Green Bay Packers would be crazy to let him walk. So if you were going to sum up, what do you think is happening or will happen with Aaron Rodgers?
Do I think they trade him? No. Do I think he 1,000,000% knew what he was doing when he said what he said on Sunday night? Absolutely. Yeah. This is sort of the way that Aaron operates, and I think it was a message to the Packers front office. I have to be operating with a sense of urgency here because I don't have very much time left, and I want you to act with the same sense of urgency. And these guys don't live in a vacuum. I mean, Aaron's looking around too, and look at the other three teams, right? What did they do in the last offseason? Well, the Bills went and got Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. The Bucks, they bring in Tom Brady. They've already got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Ronald Jones and OJ Howard and Cam Brate. What do? They add Gronkowski. They add Shady McCoy. They add Leonard Fournette. So, and then of course, you look at the Chiefs and how aggressive they've been, over the last 3 years, putting weapons around Patrick Mahomes. And so I think as much as anything else, my read at least is that it was a warning shot to the front office. Like, I know we've got cap issues. I know that you spent a couple of years ago on defense, but time is running out and I don't have a whole lot of time left. I'm going to be 38 years old next year. I want you to operate like the Chiefs have, like the Bills have, like the Buccaneers have. And so, I don't think they trade him. But if they're not more aggressive this offseason in putting the team together, then I certainly could see a scenario where, he's pretty upset by that, and who knows what happens after that.
Have a great weekend, Albert. We appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Have a great weekend.
That's Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback Senior NFL Reporter, Lead Content Strategist.